Hi everybody, welcome to this short, sharp session on giving feedback. Tim Baker's my name and welcome to this session. It's only a short session and I just wanted to give you a few tips on how to give feedback remotely. So hopefully this will give you a sense of how to do this. It comes from my latest book, Mastering Feedback, a practical guide to better leadership conversation. So I'm going to go through some tips that might help you with that. So first of all, just a bit of background about me. If you don't know who I am, you can see that I'm I write books. I'm a keynote speaker. I'm an executive coach, and I also play rugby still in the Golden Oldies competition here in Brisbane, which is kind of sad at my age, but never mind. That's that's the way it is. But I do want to talk a little bit about this subject and give you a little bit of a sense of some things that will work for you. Now, one of the things that I think is definitely a question that would be on your mind, or anybody's mind for that matter, is how do I give feedback remotely when I'm not there to witness what is actually happening? Now, we do know that hybrid working arrangements are here to stay, or they certainly are, and they've been going that way for the last 20 years. Obviously, COVID has accelerated that to some degree. So this is not likely to go back to where it might have been 20 years ago. Hybrid working arrangements are the way of the future. So obviously, and of course, managers and leaders are still required to give feedback. So really, the idea is, how do you do this if you're not actually there at the time? So you can't actually see somebody completing a report, or you can't see them doing a piece of work. All you could perhaps see is the end result of that. So I want to give you a few tips on that today that I think might be helpful for you. So let's have a look. There's three things I'm going to do in our short session. I'm going to talk about three magic questions that you can ask people, and as a basis for feedback when people are working remotely. I will also give you some other tips on giving feedback, and I've got a special offer for you at the end of this presentation. So let's have a look at the three magic questions. Now, this is called an after-action review. Undoubtedly, you've heard of it, and it's been used extensively in the military. In fact, it came out of the US military. And of course, the military used this extensively, but the corporate world realized that there was some value in this. And so, unfortunately, though, the corporate world decided to use this as sort of like a quality assurance strategy now, which means it's devaluing the whole idea, really. But I think when you're working with someone who's working from home, you might say, well, how do I actually do this? How do I give feedback? Well, I think the best thing you can do is to actually get the other person to give you their own feedback about their own performance. Now, what that means is, here are three questions that you can ask. So let's say, for example, somebody's completed a body of work and, you know, it's finished, and perhaps it's a report, it could be anything at all, but essentially you weren't walking past them while they were doing the work, or you weren't involved in the consultations that they were making or whatever. So you don't really know. All you've got is the end result. So the first question you can ask is, what went well? So you actually ask the person at the end of it, what went well? Now, the reason why you start with that is, even if it was an absolute disaster, there's always something that went well. And so by asking that question, we start with an upward spiral of positivity rather than a downward spiral of negativity. So that's an important question. Now, you wait for the person to tell you that. So, you know, just wait and ask them, well, tell me what actually were you happy with? What went well? You can vary that question, but essentially it's about the positives that came out of that role, that job, that project. Then you can move on to the second question. And the second question is, as you can see there, what didn't go so well? Now, So now what we're doing, and even if it was a great success, there's always something, of course, that could have been done better. And what you're asking the person to do is to give you some clues about what could have been done better. And essentially now we've created pretty much a kind of a distance between what went well and what didn't go well. So I've kind of got a little bit of clarity around that. So listen to the person, and then you don't have to necessarily agree or disagree, because clearly, again, you weren't there, so you're not sure, but you certainly can listen and perhaps even paraphrase what people are saying. Now, the final question is really, what would you do differently next time? What would you do differently next time? Now, of course, again, regardless of how well it was done or how poorly it was done, the reality is there's always something that can be done better next time. And so the person might say, well, perhaps I should have done a little bit more investigation, or perhaps I should have done a bit more planning, or perhaps I should have talked to so-and-so. Whatever it might be, get that person to give you that feedback. Now, the psychology of this is that by asking these three questions, the other person, by evaluating themselves or reviewing themselves, they are in a position where they'll probably accept their own information. You know, there's an old saying that people don't argue with their own data. And I think it's very true. So people will then probably likely do whatever they need to do it better next time, because it's their own information. So this is a great tool for giving feedback. So it's not so much that you're giving feedback, but it's really that you're soliciting feedback from the person that's done the job. Give it a shot. You'll be pleasantly surprised at how well it works. So don't feel that you can't give feedback because you weren't there. Ask them for the feedback. Now, here are some other tips that I think are really important when you're working remotely with your team members, and things that I'd like you to keep in mind that are really important when people perhaps are working from home or remotely, or perhaps you're working from home and your team members are working in the office. Focus on the output, not the process. In other words, because you're not there for perhaps most of the time, focus on what was done. So what was the end result? So this includes in your briefing. So when you're briefing people, talk about the outcome you want, and the outcome might be around quality. It could be about when you want it done. There's a range of possibilities. So focus very much on the outcomes as such. And the second thing that you should do is extend the amount of time you spend on clarifying goals and priorities. I think when people are working remotely, it's very difficult for people to down tools and perhaps send you an email or get on the phone, or they might feel that they're disturbing you if they're confused about what's required. But of course, if they're in an office, it's much easier. You can just waltz down the hallway and talk to the manager. That can't necessarily be done as easily while working remotely. So my suggestion is that you spend a bit more time up front clarifying your expectations, your priorities, your goals, so that it's absolutely crystal clear in the mind of the person that you've delegated the job to what it is that you're looking for, what you want, and of course when you want it and what sort of quality you want as well. So don't rush that process. I see that happen all the time, people rushing. And of course, you know, the person's confused, they feel a bit embarrassed about ringing you. And of course, what happens is the project goes off on a tangent that you really don't want it to go off on, because there was a lack of clarity at the beginning that could have been resolved with a bit more conversation at the beginning of the exercise. So that's important. Thirdly, I think it's important, particularly for things that are a little bit complicated, I think it's very important to track what people are doing. Now, I don't mean checking up on people. That's not exactly what I mean. It's more around setting some milestones along the way where you may check in with them remotely on how they're going. So if it's a fairly involved project, then by intermittently checking in, not so much checking in, but you know what I mean, getting some progress report, just like you do if you were in the office. You might walk past the person casually and ask them, how's it all going? What's happening? What support do you need from me? And so on. So in this sense, it's all about tracking what people are doing by creating these milestones. And I'd suggest that you set them up at the beginning of the project. So in other words, it's not like a shop that you might want to talk to them on an ad hoc basis. You know, these are set parameters where people can work from. So I think that works really well for most people. Now, when you do sort of track where people are going, these meetings do not need to be long meetings. They can be, 20 minutes, and that just gives you a sense of where people are up to. And obviously, if people are off track or they're getting distracted, or maybe the goalposts have changed in your world, and they often do, as you know, then you can sort of recalibrate that with the person that you're actually working with remotely. Ask them to appraise their own work. Now, I've given you a tool to do that, and I think it's very important that you get used to using this after action review when people are working from home or remotely. So I think, certainly I think it's very, very useful just to say what went well, what didn't go well, and what would you do next time? And I think these questions really will give you a very good sense of where the person's up to, and an evaluation of their own performance as well, which of course is important. So I think this is the key, because I think some managers feel very insecure about this, and they'll want to do too many of these check-ins because they want to micromanage the process, because there's an element of risk involved in it. So if you give good briefings up front, you have your regular milestone catch-ups, perhaps online, and you give people an opportunity to appraise their own work. If you do those things effectively, it's likely that the project won't go off tangent. And if it does, of course, you can certainly redirect it back to where it needs to be. The other thing is offer feedback that's easy to implement. So if you're offering feedback, don't make generic statements such as, your timeliness needs to be improved. I mean, that's a generalization. So a more specific thing would be that I'd like to see that we can get this part of the project completed by the close of business tomorrow. Would you, is that achievable? So that's the question that you ask the other person. So if they say yes, then that's fine, and they've made a commitment, and it's likely that they will honour that commitment. So, don't generalise when it comes to these sorts of things, because if you do that, you get people very defensive, and they don't like it, and rightly so. Create and maintain trust. Now, trust is often trust is an elusive sort of concept, as you know. I mean, trust can go up and down very, very easily, depending on something you said or something you did. But I think by being really crystal clear up front with what you're requiring and working with the other person and getting their commitment to meet those requirements, you are in effect building and maintaining trust. And that's a good thing, okay? Now, regularly ask for feedback from each of your remote colleagues. Now, again, I'm probably going over ground here, but I think it's very important to ask, well, this is slightly different feedback. This is about them giving you feedback. So ask for feedback. What feedback would you like to give me about my role in this project? Now, you'll notice the words I use. I said, what feedback would you like to give me about my role in the project? Not, do you have any feedback, which is a closed question. Now, if you ask people, do you have any feedback? It's likely that they'll say no, even if they do have feedback. But if you say, what feedback would you like to give me regarding my role in the project? the implication is that there must be some feedback that you can give me, both constructive or positive, right? So I often think that managers don't do this very well because maybe you don't like to hear the answer, but at the end of the day, I think it's very, very important to do that. Okay, now I'd just like to also share with you that every Friday at 10 o'clock, I have one of these sessions, and they're short, they're to the point, and I recognize that everybody's busy, including myself, so that's why it forces me to get straight to the point. But basically, what I have is another session next Friday, which I'd love for you to attend if you found this useful. And again, it comes from my book, Mastering Feedback. And that is, how can we frame feedback for maximum effect? So what are some of the things that you need to do or not do, which will contribute to a more effective feedback? Because obviously when you give people feedback, what you want ultimately is that they will go ahead and do things differently. If it's constructive feedback, or if it's positive feedback, you want them to continue to do what they're doing. So next Friday on the 19th at 10 o'clock, I've got a session on this. And if you're interested in this, you just have to click on that link on the page there and you're in. Just register the way you did, as you did for today, and you're in and away. Now, you'll receive a copy of these slides, and you'll also receive a copy of the recording at the end of this presentation. So I'll be sharing, I'll be sending that to you. Probably not today because I'm a little snowed under, but you'll probably get this over the weekend. Now, the other thing that I'd like to, I did say that there'd be a special offer, and this is the special offer. What I want to let you know that this book, Mastering Feedback, is out on Amazon now, which I'm proud to say, and the price as I looked last was $26 and postage. So, but if you'd like a copy of my book for half the price, that's $13 plus postage, I'm more than happy to supply you with that because I've got a batch of books in my office. So all you've got to do is send me an email at tim@winnersatwork.com.au. By the close of business today, simply send me an email and I will make sure that I will send you a copy of the book and it'll be signed. I'll send you an invoice. We'll work out how we do payment depending on your circumstances. And you can get a copy of my book signed by me very quickly. So if you'd like to take that opportunity, please send me an email by the close of business today. Thank you, everyone. I've appreciated working with you today. I hope that that's been useful for you. I hope it's given you a few tips on how to give that remote feedback. And I'm hoping that next week I can share with you some of the ingredients of effective feedback. What are some of the things that, the shortcuts, if you like, some things that will actually assist you to be more effective in terms of the feedback that you give. So thank you, everyone. That's about it for me. And I appreciate you joining me today. And I wish you all the very best and have a wonderful weekend. And look forward to perhaps talking to you next Friday. All the very best. Thank you very much.